83. CJ, thanks for joining us. It's great to see you. You came to us, I know you're a constituent, I believe, of Senator Bulick, but it was Senator Chittenden and Senator Mazza that brought a situation to our attention. And I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And maybe Senator Bulick may have mentioned this as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, CJ. If 483, so there's some constituents in Senator Mazza's district that use your school right now. Mm-hmm. And you were feeling as though if 483 were to go into effect, you would not be able to take those students in the future, and you were looking for us to grandfather students in?
Correct.
Okay, can you explain what's happening in 483 that you have concerns about? Because if you were to say, okay, 483 is, if you look at the basic parts of 483, there's a big part about, anti-discrimination policy. There's this requiring that students don't have interviews and admissions tours that could impact their admissions. You've got, what else is in there? The moratorium. What's in there that really would, and then there's also the other piece, the 25 miles out of state. So I'm just trying to get a sense of what is it that would cause you to not take students from other districts, from tuitioning districts.
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me in to speak, and I'm glad to share about our position, our situation. There are a number of things in the bill that impacts different independent schools, but us specifically, there are two parts. One is the not having an admissions process, and two, there's a part in there, I can't remember what section it is, that talks about reviewing all applicable public school requirements that should be applied to independent schools. And we're so small that we don't have the bandwidth to, well, let me back up for a moment. I think it was in December, sometime this winter.
Anywhere.
What?
Go ahead.
I came earlier and talked about Rock Point. So I don't want to bore you, but if there's a spectrum of schools, we have people who are high-flying, college-bound students, and then we have kids on the other end that are in the hospital because they need so much mental health and support. We're in the middle on the education side of things. Our students, we're a niche where we're not competing with public schools or larger schools for students. It's when they can't function or not getting to school, then they're out of their realm, and then we're looking at to help kids there. So with that said, we've not accepted some students that were too high functioning. We're saying, no, we're not going to take you because you'd be just sitting and spinning. It wouldn't be healthy for you. And we've not taken some kids that needed more than we have to offer because we're in this small bandwidth where half our kids have come from a treatment center and they need a landing place to land. And other kids are struggling. They're not getting to school and they're not engaging for a whole host of reasons, whether it's high functioning ASD, whether it's suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, reactive attachment disorder. It could be a variety of reasons that they're not getting to school. But we create this atmosphere where kids with this on tenterhooks can come into school and start where they are, and we move them forward very slowly. So we have a kind of a range that we can serve well. Without having an admissions process, we wouldn't be able to kind of protect that space for the kids that are here now and really work in our wheelhouse to help the kids that we're doing so successfully. And if we were to take any kid new, my interpretation is that we have to take any kid without admissions process. And I think we're so small, that could really disrupt the learning experience of the kids that are here now. And I also feel like ethically to take the money, I'd have to have no admissions process. So I would have to follow that. If I didn't follow that, I'm opening the school up for a lawsuit, and we don't have we're doing okay, but we don't have like all these funds to help protect ourselves. And as a steward of the school, I'm trying to say, how do I protect these kids, provide this service? And by losing that gate to come in, we're not discriminating, but we're trying to find the right match for kids.
Yeah.
And so I think that I'm really impressed with the efforts put in to look at discrimination in our state and our schools, because I think any school that's discriminating shouldn't be approved, shouldn't be allowed. That's just that focusing on that behavior makes sense to me. For the schools like ours that have a niche that we're not trying to pull people from other schools, our kids are coming that they can't get to school.
I thought we had a carve out for schools like yours in terms of the admission process.
Hi CJ, that was my question. So there seems, as far as I can tell, there's a provision in 483 that would allow students on an IEP or a 504 to go to the school that best suits their needs. Would that not be you all?
So we're not a therapeutic, I think a therapeutic school, is it for therapeutics, right? Is that?
Yes, it is defined as therapeutics, yes.
So we're not I call us lowercase t therapeutic. We don't have therapists on staff. We don't have a psychiatrist. We don't have a full-time special educator. We have a special educator who consults with highly competent staff. All of our students are in therapy, but outside of the school. And so not every student in our school is on the IEP or 504 plan. So we don't qualify for that. And that would actually we'd become a different kind of school. So we don't fit into that carve out.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
Senator.
Yeah, just to comment on what you just said, CJ, I think that's the challenge that I'm feeling the issue with is that, at least in my district, what I've learned very clearly over the last few weeks is there are a lot more schools than I thought that take students who have needs that aren't necessarily in an IEP or a 504. And, the challenge is figuring out how to navigate that. And so it's, that's just wanted to share that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I have the same concern. It's how do you make sure that there's the good fit for a student, if they're on a 504 or IEP or not, and they just have particular needs that you want to make sure are met by the school. We heard we're having some people in public schools do this. CTE programs do a big admissions process. We're going to hear about it where kids get rejected sometimes because they're not a fit for that program. So we're looking to make sure there's some consistency there. We heard, I think we have them coming in, the local CTE program turned away, I think they'll tell us 60 kids last year. These are public dollars, but the kids just aren't a fit for that program for one reason.
What's CTE?
It's attached to Spalding, so it's CVCC, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder if I know, because I feel like the intent is really to serve kids and to support kids, and we're trying to find our way through this. I wonder what the best way is to look at independent and public schools collectively on that spectrum I refer to when we're looking at a kid's need, like where in there, collectively looking at like where can that kid get what they need the best and direct them in that direction. It seems like a different approach, but I just wonder how we can work together more.
Yes, sir.
CJ, do you know what other states do with this particular issue? Do you have any, I need to do some research, but I've just been wondering like what Massachusetts does and other New England states, and do you know?
That's a great question. I don't know, but I do have some contacts in ASNE, and I could help connect you and myself. We could do it together to find out, because I'd be curious too. The ASNE is the Association of Independent Schools of New England.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find if you can find if some of these schools have just decided not to do interviews or campus tours. I mean, frankly, I feel like it's a kind of a self-esteem. I think it helps a student in some ways to tour, to visit, interview, to have that kind of experience. I haven't been convinced that it's a bad thing, but the House obviously has, so I'm trying to figure that out a little bit. And I think others on this committee are as well.
Yeah, I think if the tenor of the experiences, and we talk about transferable skills. So for a young person to be saying, is this, schools checking me out, but I'm checking out the school and trying to find the right match. And as opposed to like, are you going to get into this elite situation? That's not what we're trying to do. And have them be part of like, no, you need to be thoughtful and be engaged in your process too, whether it's for high school, for college, for a job, for wherever you are. Like that kind of learning is really important, but not about exclusive better or worse. Like what's the right thing? You know, I talk to my students who go to college, I say, don't worry about the label. You don't need to go to some label school. Like, you go to the school, the college that makes sense for you. Because once you get out beyond that, no one's looking at that school. Like, they just want to know if you finished it or not. And what you want to do is learn and grow and become more and more effective. And that's, if you go to some school that you think looks good but isn't the right match, that doesn't help you.
Senator Gulick?
I just wanted to make a comment about, I think, my sense is the intention of this bill, generally speaking, is to achieve a little bit more equity between some of our quote unquote independent private schools, approved independent schools, and public schools, because some of these independent schools receive public dollars. It seems as though they should have to operate in relatively similar ways to the public schools. And I think in terms of the admission process, generally speaking, public schools take everybody. And my sense, again, I'm not in the house.
Well, we
but
can
my
hear this, correct. Kids can be expelled, and there's
But
nothing.
my sense is this bill was trying to get to an equity lens, and that independent schools need to accept everyone in the same way public schools do, if they accept public dollars. That's just me trying to interpret.
Yeah.
And I agree with that, but the challenge that I'm facing is, for example, these niche schools, Rock Point, Compass, whatever they are, where do they fall into the picture when their role is to predominantly accept students that are facing behavioral challenges, whether or not they fall in an IEP or 504. I mean, you know, for example, Compass, there's a number of kids who go there because they got bullied excessively in the nearby public school, and you know that's not something that lands on a 504 or IEP. So, I mean, what I'm trying to figure out is how to take into consideration these niche schools that serve a specific purpose but aren't in the therapeutic school category without passing a bill that will really, you know, cause a lot of problems for them.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think we heard also from the kid from Sharon Academy. They got bullied at the public school. They wanted to leave. So you go on campus, you see what the other kids are like. You kind of get a feel for it. You sit down on the classroom, just kind of feel if it's going to be a safe spot for you. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anything else? CJ, please continue.
Yes.
Anything else you want to add?
I think that it sounds like you guys are right in the mix of it, and it's a great process and discussion. I think you've heard my concerns around the enrollment, but also there was a part in there about applying other public school requirements. And again, and I invite anyone, and Martine for sure this summer, you know, when you have some more time in your hands, when I'd love to have any of you come to the school to get a sense of what we do firsthand and how applying certain requirements wouldn't really fit with our school. And that happens with others, perhaps other smaller schools too. And so I wonder how we can address that too. If you know, what's the objective of the requirements and how can we meet the objective without necessarily doing it the same way a public school does? Because it we're really very different. But if we can be in the same spirit and the same goal, we can meet there to get the job done. Of course, benefiting the kid.
Did you testify before House Ed?
I did with Drew Graninger. We did adult. Was that? Are you your House Ed, right? No, you're.
Yeah.
So no, I came to you guys before, I believe. I didn't do House Ed.
Okay.
Drew was in here too as well.
Okay. Related to the bill, CJ, I don't know if this impacts you or not, but the other part that I'm trying to figure out a little bit is there's something that says we would be, well, let me back up. Last year, we passed a bill that said dollars can leave the state only if you are going to school in a bordering state. And we also said if you're going to a therapeutic school and you're looking for a fit, we weren't concerned about where that therapeutic school might be. It could be California. I mean, whatever the best fit for the kid. We know there are some circumstances where the state can't meet the needs. So what this bill says is no dollars can go 25 miles outside of the state. I'm struggling a little bit with the mileage. I don't know if we're cutting people off. I don't know. I haven't looked into it carefully enough. Would that impact you guys at all in any way? I mean, you know, you get students, because one of the things I want to make sure doesn't happen is we don't want New Hampshire to say, all right, we're not sending kids to Linden, to St. Johnsbury, or New York. You know, there are some of these relationships out there. You don't have any of those with other states.
That doesn't impact us. I think it's a good thing to be looking at because I think the Vermont kids should have that option when they're on the border. I'm sorry, my ear thing keeps falling out. It does not impact Rock Point, but I think it's a good thing to to be able to have our Vermont kids go.
So
next door.
just to confirm, you have no students from out of state on an IEP that are being paid for by the state, like New Hampshire, Maine, nothing like, okay, great. Senator, so, yeah, okay. Anything else? So if we, go ahead.
You know, I did, you know, you're not asking about the 2200 rules, but when that first came in, I was thinking like, can I do that then also? Because it's special ed dollars. But talking with the AOE and talking with our lawyer, they said, you know, just be in good relationship with the LEA and be clear about who you serve. Because the LEA, if we can work in concert, they're not gonna send a kid to a place where they're gonna be set up to fail. And that's the collaboration piece I think is really good. The 483 upped the bar and changed it and made it more intense. So I think it's just how can we collaborate more and be an open dialogue to best serve the young person. It's not about me filtering kids out. It's about me making sure with the LEA that we got the right skill set to serve that kid. So that's where I hope to put our energy.
So we're going to go through the bill section by section, but this is one of those pieces that might get pulled. It might stay in depending on how committee members feel. But you're saying from your perspective, it's important to not have it in. You want to continue to make sure that interview happens, the campus tour, et cetera.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How many students
at Rock Point? Currently it's 32. We have between 25 and 35. We could have up to 40 really. We have 32 right now. Of the 32, 8 are being paid by district funds.
Anything else? Okay. Really appreciate it, CJ.
I appreciate your thoughtfulness and your time, and I hope it can change in the bill. If it can't, as with Martine, I do hope that there could be a grandfather clause so the kids who are here are able to finish their schooling. I'm already looking at trying to find other ways, revenues to support them, but we'll cross that bridge when we need to after you finish your work.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
So we'll look at it Friday, but interview process, do you want to keep it in, pulling it, or it just gets some thoughts. We've had some testimony on the interview piece.
We've already done a walkthrough on this, right?
Yeah, to CJ's point, I understand why certain schools need to interview. They're filling niches. They're not trying to be generic schools. It's important for both parties to evaluate each other.
We're not all going to be one size fits all.
I agree with that.
Yep.
And then as an addendum, how, on top of that, how do we make it so that moving beyond the, filling a niche part, how do we prevent discrimination? How do we prevent people from saying, you can't come to the school for X, Y, and Z reasons that are.
Didn't 2200 take care of that? And we already have laws in the books about non-discrimination. I don't think we need another set of identical laws. But I think we take care of that. But if I'm wrong, please highlight. But the interview process, even the 25-mile thing, this just seems 25-mile thing is a little bit arbitrary. There's a 28-mile school up in Quebec that's servicing the Northern Kingdom community. It's 28 miles. Okay. Just seems like somebody just pegged a distance that seemed reasonable at the time, without doing research.
You want it to be 30 minutes.
No.
I know,
Like,
I'm just, yeah.
Right, I think we need to look at where the schools serve and if there's, you know, if it's reasonable that 30 is the answer because of that 28 mile school. Good.
What I would really like to make sure that we end is sending kids to foreign countries.
Yeah.
Public, so including Canada. Yeah, if 483 doesn't go anywhere, I'd at least like to see that go into the miscellaneous bill if possible. It's absurd to me that we send public dollars to Sweden, Japan, first.
Right.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah, we got rid of it last year, the House would pick it up, but we did that also, and we grandfathered in, of course, those kids, just so they can finish.
We have more testimony on 483.
Yeah, we've got, you have Senator Gulick's witness.
Yeah, and if we need to fill some time up, I just, I want to bring it back to equity. And we know the social determinants of health and how your success in this country is very much based on where you live. And I have a whole bunch of students in my district who live in poverty, who are new Americans who can't afford to move to Landgrove so that their parents can fly them to Switzerland to go to school. This is an equity issue. I think it's really important if we're going to be this state that claims to be taking care of our people. And when I say our people, I'm talking about the most marginalized and vulnerable, and we need to make some changes. And that is one, I just want to echo what Senator Hashim just said, that is just extremely inequitable. Because you're setting up some people to succeed and some people to fail right off the bat.
Well, I'm going to back up just a step, just because I don't think we all know what this whole international school cost is all about, like who these people are. Most likely they're Vermont residents. They're working overseas somewhere. Could be that the students are in a school near their parents, but the parents are paying Vermont taxes and property tax. I mean, I did that for freaking 15 years. But
I'm paying tax to fix the roads in Brattleboro, and I don't live in Brattleboro. This is what we do as a state. We support each other as a
I know
community.
that, but there's a cap on that. All I'm saying is I don't think we know enough about the overseas for people to really cast stones out. I really don't think we do. It doesn't sound good.
We know some of the families who've used it in the past.
Okay, well, maybe if that were, a contentious element, that we bring someone in that can talk about why.
Not somewhere I live.
No, and not from where I live, but from, I can name the towns, I won't, but,
Well, any choice town.
Yeah.
State.
Anyway,
it's just, I don't know, I think it's a little disingenuous since we're having an open conversation until Aaron gets here to be talking about like the right fit for the kid. Because I could easily say, well, my kids, the right fit would have been a ski school in Zermatt, Switzerland. That would have been the right fit for my kids. I mean, is that where we're at? That everyone's
the
gonna get
question, I think
their
the
right
question
fit?
would properly be asked to somebody like CJ. What did he mean? Not us, because we're not in that situation.
And I would disagree part of that. I mean, this is going back to the bullying, harassment issues. There are some independent schools that are picking up where public schools are failing, which is, providing niche services for kids who are experiencing these sorts of things and not getting the resources that they need in that public school.
That's not the conversation we're having right now, though. We're talking about going overseas to private.
No,
I thought you were talking about equity.
I am trying to talk about equity.
Okay, I was unclear, so disregarding this.
I just think the overseas bit, again, minor subset of Vermont citizens. There might be more of a story there than we recognize. It doesn't sound good. I agree with you 100%, but we haven't heard from them, so we can't really speak, intelligent about it.
Did you want to say anything else about equity? Bullying?
No, I I think I was just got distracted and thought we were talking about something else, so.
Well, it's all connected. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
in a way, it's all connected.
In my mind, I think the overseas bit, for me, it's an easy call. I mean, I wouldn't like the fact that if I'm paying tax dollars for somebody to go to a fancy school and switch, I just don't think it makes sense. If you're living overseas and you want to send your kid, I mean, and that's the other part. If you're living overseas, but you have the residence in Vermont, and then you're using that residence to get other taxpayers to pay for your kid to go to school where you're currently living overseas.
They're paying Vermont taxes.
Yeah.
And they're paying Vermont property taxes.
And there are public schools they could be sending
Are
their
they-
kids to here in the state. Or
Are they paying
independent
non-resident taxes or resident?
I'm just saying that it's an odd scenario. I don't think we really understand it. I agree with you that at first blush it's a problem. It should be corrected. But I'm just telling you, I don't feel that we know enough about it to, just like we don't know enough about whether it's 25 miles or 28 miles. We just don't. It's difficult to, put a black line through and say, no, it's not appropriate.
So it sounds like we're talking about the bill. Do we amend it? Or do we just say, no, there's too many glitches?
Well, it sounds like we're gonna amend it one way or the other.
Right.
And we're hearing from some parents, we're hearing from other people, we're hearing from special educators, et cetera, this week. So by the end of the week, I think we'll have a good idea of where the committee is. I mean, for me, as I've said, the big piece is the anti-discrimination piece, the special education piece. And I do think there is a home. I don't think it's a one size fit all. I do think that for certain kids, certain schools are better fit, like a top point in some cases, could be saving a kid's life. Okay, Aaron McGuire, please. Yeah.
It's overwhelming.
I pulled that on my couch.
That's a nice one.
Should. That would work. It's what the heck it is. They make nice little wooden statuettes.
Yeah, you could fly your kids out.
Hi, Ms. McGuire, how are you?
Hi, can you all hear me okay?
Yes. Thanks for
Okay,
joining us.
Sure, happy to be with you. I'm sorry I'm not in person. I am away, and so I'm hoping that my internet works just fine. And it is possible that it could be a little bumpy. So if that happens, just please do let me know. But so far, so good, hopefully.
So far, so great, and thank you. I realize you're away. This is probably your vacation week. I really cannot thank you enough for taking the time to come before us, in addition to
I'm
everything
glad.
you're doing. So,
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
yeah, great. So, H483, Senator Gulick thought you might be able to give us some thoughts and some ideas on the bill.
For sure. Thanks
you.
for inviting me. Good to see all of you. I'm grateful to have an opportunity to talk with all of you. I am hopeful that you'll feel free to engage me in a conversation. I will certainly share some thoughts with you today that I hope will be helpful, and then always happy to answer questions as well. I think it's always helpful for people to know sort of who I am and do a brief introduction. So for those of you that I don't know, I am currently serving as the Director of Equity and Inclusion, as well as the Co-Director of Student Support Services for the Essex Westford School District. That means I do all DEI work as well as special education and 504 disability services and really much more in public education in Vermont. Even EWSD, which is considered large in Vermont, is relatively small, and many of us wear many hats. I also have been through the presidency of the Vermont Council of Special Education Administrators Administrators, and I currently serve as the past president of the National Organization for Special Education Directors. So I'm the past president of CASE, which is the Council of Administrators of Special Education. I did talk to Beth Cobb, our superintendent, before I came to speak to you today, and so she does know that I'm testifying. And if I were to be sort of associated in this testimony with any particular group, it probably would be the Essex Westford School District. But I like to share those kinds of things so that you know the spaces that I'm in and the information that I have to share. And actually, this particular topic really I'm informed by my length of years in education in Vermont using independent schools for special education purposes, as well as interacting with the 4 academies and other private schools in Vermont. But I also have done a fair amount of work on private schools and the voucher systems that are happening all across the nation. And so I do bring a little bit of a national perspective to you on this dynamic of using public funds in private space. It is something that happens a fair amount in Vermont. We certainly have public-private partnerships. That's sort of a term I like to use to describe them in a number of different areas. I think Vermont, has a history of that, certainly in public schools, as well as in early childcare. We now have that design. And, we even have it in the mental health system where the designated agency system in Vermont is, the Agency of Human Services is asking 501c3s to provide mental health services in Vermont. So I'm hoping to talk with you a little bit about a systems level of thinking, because I think it's really important that that lens is brought to the table. We can talk a lot about Vermont. Vermont is unique. There are a lot of pieces of us that I'm so proud of and live in Vermont for those reasons. And I do think it's helpful sometimes to look outside of ourselves, right, at the national landscape where we are having a design that many other states have been engaged in around vouchering students to private schools. We don't talk a lot about it that way here, but I do want to sort of touch that, because I feel like for me to make comment today, I do want to make sure that I am in a space where I can bring to you the best of my thinking. And that's often how I think about it in other spaces, is really using public funds in private space. So thanks for letting me do that intro. Let's talk specifically about 483. I do think generally it is a step forward for sure, related to how we as a public institution looking to educate our students in Vermont the best way we know how for their futures. I think it's a step forward if we are going to use public funds in private spaces to educate students. I'm an equity director, so what that means is that I come with a very clear sense of ensuring that not only do students not experience discrimination, but they also get to live their best selves whenever we do anything in the context of public school delivery. We don't want identity to interfere. And as a matter of fact, we want identity to always be a strength for everyone, no matter what that identity is, right? So if we're thinking about students from the LGBTQ community and wanting to make sure that they are able to live their best life in every aspect without interference from discrimination or harm around their gender identity, making sure that racism is not perpetrated by our public institutions. And I do think that obviously Carson v. Macon, right, indicated that religion cannot be a reason not to engage with a private school for purposes of provision of public funds. If you do that otherwise, and Vermont does that, right? We do provide tuition vouchers to private schools. And so we cannot deny a private school now that is a religious school simply because of religion. I will say, though, that there's certainly an intersection between challenges for the LGBTQ community and some religious spaces, not all of them, but some of them. And it is very important to me and to a lot of people in this state, and probably you all sitting here too, that students don't have experiences using public funds that are discriminatory in any way. And I think that's part of what H 483 brings to you, is an opportunity to be really clear about that. So I just wanted to offer support about making sure that not only do students not end up discriminated against, but they have full access to anywhere where we're using public funds. I just really do not think that we should ever provide any public funds in any space that is discriminatory, in an enrollment practice or in a service practice. I mean, you know, even in the mental health system, like I would never want a 501c3 to be designated as a DA and then be able to only serve certain populations. That would just not be okay. And so I think 483 really kind of helps us move forward if we are going to maintain a voucher and private school design for public education in Vermont. You know, I want to just also appreciate some of the creativity and the ways in which education is delivered in some of the private schools in Vermont. You know, I am not here to disparage that group of people. I've worked with many of them. I will say, though, that those spaces do not comply with a lot of the expectations that your body puts into public school. And I think it's important that we just stop and ask ourselves whether your expectations are only for some students or whether they really are for all students. Because there are some things that private schools are not responsible for related to accountability practices, related to curricular expectations, related to MTSS, thinking about the amazing implementation of Act 173. It's been hard. Not here to say it's easy. I'm not here to say it's perfect. But in my work, I'm working actually with a private school now that is seeking to really lift up their MTSS and their design through the lens of Act 173. But it's a very different landscape in that space. It just, you know, we've grown our public system to be what it is today. And that space has not been required to do those same things. So that landscape looks different. I think I'll just want to end by saying that the way that we hold ourselves, public schools and private schools who use public funds, accountable, I think we need to be thoughtful about how we do that. The stories that you all hear matter. So sometimes you are hearing incredible stories about private schools in Vermont that are doing amazing work with students. And I want to be careful about this conversation dismissing that. Those are real stories. They matter. Those are students, right? Who are maybe having their needs met really well in a certain place. But I think it's important that while we look at the stories that we hear and what I'll describe as qualitative data, when you hear a story, it's a data set, and you hear a qualitative data set, I think it's important that we balance that with both qualitative and quantitative, as well as positive and negative qualitative data. If you look across the nation around the experiences of students in the United States through voucher systems into private schools, we see a whole range of experience, both positive and negative. And I think we see that here in Vermont too. For me, it's more about a systems lens, right? We don't legislate off stories. We want to make sure that we think holistically about the systems that we implement and they're what's best for everyone. And I do think that our current design in reference to the public-private partnership, where we provide public school through private schools in Vermont, needs a lens. You know, we need to look at it carefully, and we should apply an equity lens. It's important that we do not see discriminatory practices or lack of access in the same way that we wouldn't see a lack of access in public schools, because then we go down a road that doesn't match what we espouse to be where we believe is the right direction. So I think those are the things that I wanted to share about 483, sort of from a systemic lens. I am supportive of the bill. I think that it is a good step forward towards some of the things that I've described that can be problematic. And I hope that, I'm happy to answer questions about independent schools from a special ed lens or other questions that the committee might have. And thanks for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Questions for Ms. McGuire? Senator Weeks?
Thank you. Irene, obviously. Oh, Aaron, I'm sorry, I missed her.
That's okay.
So sorry. Hey,
That's
so,
okay.
clearly you've got a great deal of experience in this field and certainly you're providing some excellent insights. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on the implementation, the intent and implementation of the 2200 series. If you think that was an appropriate, solid move, and then the gaps between the 2200 series and the potential 483 bill, House 483 bill.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. I think that private schools needing to implement a full complement of special education services and 173, and within the context of MTSS, like really being a robust provision of services to meet the intent of what we've asked for under Rule 2200 in the special education rules series in its totality. And then I also think about the reasons that Act 46 came forward. Small institutions have a hard time providing what our legislature has expected of educational delivery by itself. It's why we consolidated educational entities into larger entities with, really not being able to have schools of 140 or 200 students and be able to meet all of the demands and the needs that we've said are essential in public ed. So I think that what we've asked for to happen is appropriate, and I think it needs to happen. I also think that private schools individually doing everything on their own I understand why that's become a challenge. I think it's completely appropriate to expect provision of special education. I don't think schools should be able to deny access to students who are otherwise appropriately placed under IDEA in a general public school setting, and then they don't have access to this place where we're providing public funds. It's a private space, and they say, no, sorry, we can't meet your needs. I mean, that just starts to become problematic. So the idea that we expect private schools to provide special education in order to be non-discriminatory since we provide public funds into those spaces, I think is essential. I also have a great deal of empathy for small private schools trying to function as public schools inside of the current design. And again, that is why Act 46 came forward, because it's very difficult to meet all of the requirements that you would need to meet to provide the high level of education that we in Vermont expect for our students if the only populace is 146 students and it's just that school only doing all of the things that need to be done, including provision of a free, appropriate public education for students with disabilities. So it's not totally surprising to me that it's been a real challenge. And I think that if we are going to maintain a private-public partnership with private schools to provide public education in Vermont, that they need to be able to serve students under the federal law as students with disabilities who have a least restrictive environment of the general ed setting. They need to be able to do that. How we do that, what that looks like, is 2200, did it sort of thread the needle exactly as it needed to? I think you'll hear different perspectives depending on what people are contending with. But I do know that it is definitely challenging for private schools to be able to do all of that body of work. Does that help answer the question that you asked?
Yeah, it does. I appreciate that. Just a little more specifically, do you feel that the 2200 series did an adequate job of addressing the LGBTQ community that you raised at the beginning of your briefing?
You know, the idea that open enrollment is present and non-discriminatory practice is expected is appreciated. I don't think that we go far enough when we create a floor of non-discrimination. So as an equity director, I think that there is more to do than make sure people don't experience discrimination. I think that's like kind of your basic floor of what should be expected. I think that really protecting people who often experience discrimination is a very important job. And I definitely would prefer to see higher levels of expectation than non-discrimination, but I also understand the limitations of a legislative body to some degree as well. So, you know, I'm not sure the exact specific language that you're asking me about in Rule 2200. And so if you would like to read the specific language, I might have a more to add. But I would just say that generally speaking, for me, non-discrimination is a floor that for me is like a non-negotiable. And I would expect that there wouldn't be differential treatment, that there would be a welcoming and excitement about people with differences. I believe that difference is a strength. Difference is an amazing opportunity of all kinds. And I am not sure how, if 2200 is played out in that lens or not. I want to be careful about speaking about things I'm not sure about. So would want to be careful about that. But is there a specific set of words that you'd like to read to me from that?
No, I don't. No, I don't. I just, I was curious your basic impression.
Sure.
2200 series, just so you know, Aaron, there's anti-discrimination language in there that says no public dollars can go to a school unless they follow the anti-discrimination policy and they can put it on their website, things like that. And I think it's safe to say, I agree absolutely that it's more than just an anti-discrimination policy. And I would say that's true with our public schools as well, as we have heard.
Totally.
Absolutely. Like, how do we beef them up and give them the supports that they need to make sure that students feel safe and welcome?
Yes, I agree with you completely.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Hi, Erin. I had a quick question for you that I asked of CJ Spirito earlier, but neither of us came up with an answer. We're hearing from some small private schools that aren't therapeutic, but that help kids that might have mental health needs or are differently abled. Do you, out of curiosity, do you know what other states do? Because we're being told that some of these kids can't be served in the public schools, so that's why they go to these small schools. Do you, like Massachusetts, for example, do you have any sense of what they might do?
Yeah, I don't know specifically Massachusetts, Martine, but I think it's worth having, I'll just walk through a little bit of the independent private school design in special education and whether or not the school is or is not approved under Vermont rules to provide special education, the lens of focusing in on particular populations of students through what we might describe as a therapeutic lens. Vermont has a very long history of using special education dollars to meet the needs of students who are struggling to be able to have a least restrictive environment in the public school setting for one reason or another under special education. And we've used independent or private schools to actually do that body of work. And I think that's what makes sometimes this conversation also confusing for people, because that is sort of a subpopulation of private schools, if you will, that do that body of work. There are most states that I'm aware of, and I want to be careful. I think there are plenty of states out there that use a similar model that have public schools that have larger continuums of available services. I guess that's the way I would describe it. So, you know, the idea that I'll just give you an example. Essex Westford School District does not have right now, although we are looking at changing this, right now, K-8, we do not have any environment that is specifically for delivery of special education in the context of separation from the classroom, right? Most states have special education classrooms or schools where students who with like needs can have their needs met on a continuum. There is less and less of there's less of that in Vermont than there is in other places, in my opinion, which makes us rely on these independent private schools much more strongly. It is my opinion that public schools do need to increase their capacity to be able to increase their continuum of care. I don't think, though, that that means that we won't require very specialized service provision in a more contained setting for some students. And again, you know, we're a small state. And so the idea that we would benefit our state by thinking about the private-public partnership to help build capacity in very specific circumstances where public schools cannot provide the services, but you know, you build out a small environment that can really do that well and do it for, you know, this part of the state or that part of the state. You know, Chittenden County is a relatively large place, and you can build a school that will provide those services there, and people will use them. But it is my opinion that public schools need to increase their own capacity to do some of this work rather than using sort of those separate settings that are private or independent in Vermont. Again, that's not to say I want independent or private schools to close that are doing that now. But that is a different conversation than the reason those schools are closing. There are some schools that are closing. They're expressing an inability to do the work based on implementation of the school approval process and the amount of tuition they're allowed to charge to public schools. So that's kind of a separate issue. And Martine, I don't know if that's something that you want to talk about or not, but generally speaking, I think public schools need to increase their capacity. Yes, there may be a need for some specific delivery of independent school or private schools that can do very specific work with students that are not able to be met in the public school continuum. But I think we need to expand our public school continuum.
Thank you.
Does that make
That
sense?
Yeah, yeah. I need to do some research because I am curious about what other states are doing.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely, they have their own schools that, separate schools that will provide those services to students in a lot of other states.
That are related to the public, to the district.
Yeah,
Okay.
that are owned by the district. I mean, that exists in Vermont too. There are school districts that have separate programs in separate
Right.
buildings that run a school specifically to meet certain students' needs.
We've got that in Burlington, actually.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, the idea of doing it is certainly something that we can do. There's just a very, you know, we contend in Vermont with the way things grew versus the way we would build things today, right? Probably that happens everywhere. But the way this has all grown up is that we have built a private-public partnership to do this body of work instead of building it out inside of public systems. Is that the right decision? Is that the wrong decision? I think that's actually your question. Like, where do we want these services and this body of work happening for our students? Do we want it inside of private space, or do we want it in public space, or are we supportive of the private-public partnership? And if so, what are the requirements, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And really great of you again to zoom in while you're away.
Happy to do it.
Any other
Anything else for the good of the afternoon?
I
Anything
think we're
else?
good.
Okay. All right. Great.
I hope it's
Have a
sunny
great
and nice wherever you are.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Take care, everyone.
All
Bye-bye.
right, let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back and pick up.